I know you're going through something extremely difficult right now, or you have been through something extremely difficult. All of those things, in my opinion, are preparation for what's to come for you. Most people get problem solving really badly wrong. And I would argue that it's a high percentage of people who are really good at problem identification, but they're not very good at problem solving. Execution is power, and action overrides motion every single time. Why in the world would you want to engage in self-development, personal development for you to transform your career and your life? You may not want to go to another motivational seminar. You may not want to read another book. You've read enough books. You've got shelves like mine here full of books of personal development, self-development, but you still find yourself lower than the expectation you have for yourself. But there's a reason why you continue the continual practice and consistent development of self-development, and that is that you're going to dramatically reduce or eliminate your personal suffering. And what does that mean? Well, it just means that in life you'll have less pain because you'll have strategies, tools, methodologies to deal with that. And when you aim higher for yourself, it feels good. Let's get into it. Point number one is to remember that the phrase knowledge is power actually doesn't ring true. What actually is power is execution. And why do I say that? Because there's a difference between moving and being in motion and actually taking action on the key things that you need to do. And you'll know how this feels because sometimes you get this kind of physical manifestation of resistance to taking action. And that's driven by the fears and the beliefs that you have about your own capabilities. So just for the record, set the record straight here. Execution is power, and action overrides motion every single time. And I'm going to give you some examples because me jumping on this video today requires me to take action. But I could think about it and overthink about it. I could script it out. I could go through the video several times. But in the end, me moving around the video versus recording the video is very different. I want to make sure that career professionals just like you, senior executives who've made an incredible amount of money, been successful, climbed up the theoretical hierarchies of your organizations, can get to a point where you can get more impact, more meaning, more fulfillment from your work. So you can just feel more rounded and like you're making a serious contribution and leaving a fantastic legacy for you. The way you can do this is start to think about how do you set up your daily intention so that you are taking action in your magic time, the most productive hours of the day. Now, you'll see me in other videos talk about daily routines and things you can be doing in your morning and throughout the day and at the evening to actually make you feel better and feel good. But let me be really clear with you. That is not a substitute for those 2 or 3 hours when you are in your peak performing state. And for most people, that is sometime in their morning when they've slept, they've refreshed their body, they've recovered from the days and activity before, and they're ready to focus with their brain on some specific project tasks and activities. And you should schedule block time in this window. The massive mistake that people make is they stay in motion and not in action. And what do I mean by that? In motion is back-to-back meetings. In motion is having one-to-one meetings with your team in the prime time hours when you should be taking action. It means that you're talking with knowledge, but you're not executing on the work. Now, you might argue with me that a stand-up at the beginning of the day is actually work, but I would argue not, because there's no productivity, there's no outcome, there's no output in that session. But that doesn't mean to say that you can't invest time in the afternoons when you're lower in energy in some of these activities. But I want you to be careful about what the difference is between motion and action for you, knowing this fact. Execution is power. Point number two, I want you to fall in love with your inner critic. Yes, there's a part of you that is always aiming to meet the expectation you set for yourselves. And sometimes we beat ourselves up and get caught in a negative spiral because we're dissatisfied with exactly where we've got to within our career, within our life, within our health, within our relationships. And when we feel like that, it's because we're listening to the inner critic rather than loving the inner critic. And here's why I want you to fall in love with that critic. Because the critic is comparing you, this version of you, to the version of you that you were in the past. And I'm going to tell a little story in a minute that's going to tie this back for you perfectly. So, the version of you today, why it doesn't feel as comfortable about things, about where you want to go, or where you feel like you need to be, is because you can see where you came from. And some of the things you look back on, you're ashamed of, you feel guilty about, you're maybe angry about, you've got this some negative emotion. So you can look back at your younger self and say, what was I thinking? Yeah. But if you fall in love with this, it's vital because it demonstrates your growth and your progress to where you find yourself right now. And that's vital because where you're going to find yourself in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years is you're going to still have the same DNA. You're going to have the same personality at that point, and people will be able to see that common theme inside of you. But your growth is going to be able to perform at a different level. And that's why over the years we become more wise and we share our wisdom. And that process in itself makes us wiser. That when we are paying it forward in our 40s, 50s, 60s, we feel wiser because we're giving out more information. And when we do that, we hear more data in the opposite direction. And so we start to become this kind of almanac of information. When you look back, don't criticize who you were when you were younger or criticize where you are right now. Just accept. I've come a long way. So here's my quick story for you. Sometime in the years between 2012 and 2015, I worked for one of the largest information services companies in the world. In fact, you can consider them to be the number one as it relates to credit data and risk mitigation for financial institutions, insurance companies, and lots of other industries besides. But here's the thing. I remember being uber competitive about climbing up this theoretical hierarchy, which I now call a career jungle gym. I don't think about it as a career ladder anymore, but it was my goal to find myself in a position of being the head product person or the chief product officer, chief data officer. That was my goal. And I had this burning desire inside of me to climb to the top. But in doing so, I elbowed people out the way and I didn't have empathy and I lacked compassion and frequently would upset other people that I work with. And that's the inner critic of me. If I want to hold on to that and say, you're a really bad dude, then I'm going to feel really bad about it. But now I live today and I look back at that and go, okay, that's not cool, but I'm glad that you've grown and you've made the progress to not treat people that way anymore. But you went through it because you learned when people called you out. And there's been a couple of people in the last 5 years, maybe 6 years, who've said to me, James, I feel listened to, but I don't feel heard. And that was the clue to me. I need to change something inside of me because I wasn't hearing what those people were saying to me. And so for both of them, I've made my apology. Whether they accept that, I don't know, but I can keep saying sorry. But I am sorry for that behavior in that moment. But I'm grateful that they taught me to grow and to progress and get me to this point. Step 2, love your inner critic. Tip number 3, buying lottery tickets is dumb. Yeah, I said it. The average amount of money that is spent on lottery ticket buying every single year is somewhere in the realm of $400 to $600 per household. Did you hear what I just said? And the reason why that's dumb is because that money could have been invested in an income producing asset. But these people, when asked, can you lend me $400 to $600? Do you have $400 to $600 for maintenance of your home, for replacing car parts, for medical bills, for any other reason other than spending it on lottery tickets? They do not have that money. You know, what's fascinating about this as a self-development lesson for you is the chances of you being successful in that lottery, we already know are infinitesimally small, yet people still continue. But the chances of you becoming wealthy by just investing that into an income producing asset is much greater. If you did that every single year, you could invest that in college funds for your kids. You could put it in all kinds of places. You know, the place for that kind of money that I think you should be placing it, sports games, live events, concerts, live music, traveling with your kids for a camping weekend. And you may say, well, a camping weekend doesn't cost $400 anymore. It may not, but it really depends on you and your budget and your style. But listen, the memories that you get, the experience of life that you get by investing that money in those things will always be greater than the mega millions win that you get. Because when you get the mega millions, by the way, until you've learned money, because the reason why you might be playing the game is because you don't have any money, but that's about financial literacy. And so if you don't have any money right now and you want more money, guess what? When you get that money, you're not going to know what to do with it. And the vultures will come and strip it away from you because they know how to get it. So be really careful about this. This is a self-development item that I want you to be focused on is financial literacy, and buying lottery tickets is done. Hey, I'm just going to jump in here. And if you're enjoying this video so far, what I'd really love for you to do is to move closer with me so we can have a free introductory call and conversation. The link to book that is in the description below. So just drop in there. And I would love to meet with you, especially if you're in that category of vice president, senior vice president. Maybe you're the chief executive of a company. Maybe you're the business owner of a company and you've got some challenges right now. And if there's something I can do to help you, I would love to meet you on a call, not least because I may know somebody that you need, but you may also know somebody that I need. So hop in and book that call now. Let's get back to the video. The fourth item I want to talk to you today about self-development is that of problem solving. When you work on yourself and you start to invest in personal development, professional development for you, you can start to interrogate and investigate how to become a better problem solver. Now, most people get problem solving really badly wrong. In fact, I would argue that it's a high percentage of people who are really good at problem identification, but they're not very good at problem solving. And I'm going to give you the strategy right now for where you know on each side of the fence. Problem identification looks like this. Wow, I can't believe he did that. I can't believe she said that. That guy cut me up. This guy went through the red light. And it's all observational about a response to something we see in the external world. And that response is a conflict with a personal value. And so that creates a personal issue for us. And we externalize it like it's not our problem. But problem identification is rooted in two things: responses and the issues that those responses create. And the issues become heartfelt justifications and excuses for why we won't do the things we know we need to do, even though we know what we know. But when you dive into personal development and self-development, and this critical lesson I want to share with you, you start to become a really good problem solver. And when you are a good problem solver, you are focused on two other things, not the responses, not the issues. Now, I'm not saying it's not okay to have an emotional or knee-jerk reaction to something, especially if it's something sinister and serious, like a serious illness in your family or a bereavement. Especially if that bereavement is sudden, you're going to have a response, and that is going to create an issue for you. You know, what do we do now that mom's gone, like dad's gone? You know, I lost my mom in 2009, and creates lots of issues in that moment. But problem solving, irrespective of the dynamics, whether you're in relationships with your family or you're at career or at work, problem solving is focused on these two things. What are the consequences of this issue, this response? What are all the things that could be that we need to consider? So kind of think about this as scenario planning. So when you want to solve a problem, think about all of the consequences for a particular course of action for something that's happened. So let's say you're in an organization with software, IT, and there's a hardware issue or there's a software issue, there's an outage issue. Going through the consequences, and I've learned this from some incredible operational people who taught me the power of looking at all the consequences, but you can do this for every single problem in your life. And when you do this, you'll start to come up with a whole list of things to avoid. And then you can rank those, you can prioritize those, and you can start to take a look at, well, these are all the consequences, but these are the bad ones, real bad consequences that we can probably steer away from. But these are the ones that don't have as much impact, but they are still a consequence. And so what we're looking for then is the flip of that. So how you solve the problem is then to ask questions about all of the alternatives. So if these are all the consequences, the things that could be, then the alternatives is the flip of that. It's the way to say, well, how do you resolve every single consequence? Well, you resolve it by asking the question, what would be the 1, 2, or 3 tasks that we would be able to do as an alternative approach to solve this problem? I recommend you dive into these things, consequences and alternatives, every time there's an issue. It doesn't matter how big it is. It could be trouble with kids. It could be trouble with your spouse. It could be trouble with the house. It could be problems that just happen. You know, think about right now we have 2 cars that need to go in for maintenance. That's the problem. Okay, so we can think of what are the consequences? Well, if we don't get the cars maintained, they're going to break down. So we've got to make sure the oil's changed, the filters are changed, you've got to do those things. But what are the alternatives? Well, there are multiple providers, there are multiple cost points, there are multiple things that we can go and discuss in the mechanic car world and think about how we can do that. So there are multiple ways to solve it. But what we do then have is a list of solutions. And this applies to everything that you'll ever come across as it relates to problems and problem solving. Guard it well. This is the power of self-development for you. The fifth and final point I want to share with you about self-development is a very personal story for me. I consider it to be the foundation and the bedrock for resolving all issues in my life. And I've been to some really dark places. And that's been recent, in the last, let's say, half dozen years. I've been to places where I really didn't think that I wanted to be here anymore. And I couldn't figure out, if nobody loves me, then why am I here? These are really dark moments. And so for you, having a story like that, because in the end, that suicidal ideation was just a story I was repeating to myself, telling myself that I wasn't loved. People didn't care about me. They don't reach out to me. Nobody wants to hang out in my company. It's still working very hard on bringing friends into my life that I want to hang out with. That's important. I had all these stories around my ability to be a good husband and my ability to be a good father in the face of adversity. All of it a story, all of it an excuse for why I wasn't living the life that I wanted to. And it's been a long road to recovery. So I want to share this personal, deep story with you because I know that you're going through it. I know you're going through something extremely difficult right now, or you have been through something extremely difficult. All of those things, in my opinion, are preparation for what's to come for you, because there will be other obstacles, other challenges. And I do think that there's a coin of life. And on two sides of the coin, one is struggle, that you're going to have that struggle. We talked about suffering right in the beginning. But the other side of it, and this time that I want to spend most of my time flipping that coin and it lands on, is joy, and that I can have a joyful experience for the rest of my days. And I focus on that intently so hard now, especially when you've been so far in the darkness with no light, to the point of trying to, take my own life. That's powerful. So here's what I want you to think about as you go through what's next for you, especially if you're in that moment right now. I do want you to seek professional help. If you haven't already done that, please seek the help of a professional. I did that and spent over 6 months in that person's company to transform my mental health and what was going on inside of me, to transform the story. And in the end, it came down to this self-development thing, that whether you're in a tough relationship right now, in a tough career spot right now, whether you're in a tough health position right now that you've heard some news, you're trying to figure out what's next for you, your job is to become the most curious person on the planet. And I consider this to be one of the biggest reasons, if not the biggest reason, how I was able to recover from basically being in that really dark hole. And that is that every single day is to ask questions about everything that's going on around you and really pay attention to the finite detail. And so for me, I would engage in listening to new types of music that I'd not engaged with before, and listen to the lyrics and the meaning behind the lyrics and the emotion behind the lyrics. And where did that come from for that individual? Because if you listen to most music, there's a personal story involved in those. And we can connect to that. That's why we love that so much. And so there was a band from Scotland that I engaged with over that period of recovery, and diving into all of that stuff, teaching me that my story was an excuse, just as it was an excuse for members of the band as well, that they had found themselves not savoring life. But when you start to savor life again and you have a reverence for life again and you're focused on joy, everything changes. But it only changes with your own curiosity. So if there's one thing that we can say to end this video and make sure you walk away from here with something more powerful than I can possibly give to you, it is that every single day you are asking questions of how you might resolve the difficulties and the challenges that you're experiencing in your life. So I hope this lands. I trusted this land. I have good faith that this lands with you well. I want you to take this information so that you can go and inspire and energize and motivate other people to do the same thing. But for you, let's see you rise to the top, and I'll see you there. Thank you for watching that video. If you want to learn more about what I teach inside of this channel, then just take a look at this next video. I'd love for you to go in there and you'll learn some incredible more strategies, tools, tips that are going to help you move forward in your career or business, irrespective of that mission for you. And I'll see you in there.